Mascot horror is somewhat taken off in recent times. You have your Freddies, Huggies, Tattletales, but one in particular always stuck out to me from the rest. Mr. Hopp. Debuting in 2019, Mr. Hopp has always left an impression in my mind, particularly for his horrific nature. I could go on about why I like this character, why I feel like him being sidelined in the later entries was a bad decision, but that's neither here or there. I'm here to give you all the juice on the power scaling, and thus I shall. Today, on the 4th episode of the Pit of Original Nightmares, we tackle Mr. Hopp's Playhouse and this hellish hare's terrifying power. Now, without further ado, let's dive into the scaling. To start, there are 3 games in the main series: Mr. Hopp's Playhouse, Mr. Hopp's Playhouse 2, and Mr. Hopp's Playhouse 3. The other games in the series, 1 Hour of Mr. Hopp and Mr. Hopp's Manor Escape, are non-canonical, thusly they won't be used in this video. The first game is pretty grounded by the series standards, something that's sure to last, right? It's a horror game at its core. Ruby awakens to discover her parents have been killed by Mr. Hopp and must evade the ever-prowling monster, and searches for a way to defeat him. During this time, we see Hopp effortlessly bursting through walls, floors, and even creating entirely separate rooms in the house, along with altering it to a pretty extensive state. He is also able to one-shot Ruby, who, as shown in later entries, is able to take attacks from the denizens of the underworld. These foot soldiers are fairly big, with some wielding weapons or being straight up giant, so I feel it's fair Ruby will be some form of low C or 9B as low ball, at least in durability. I don't believe this is a game mechanics thing, because we see her survive an attack from the entity in a cutscene, albeit he was probably held back. This means Hopp should sit somewhere comfortably in the 9B range based on his showings in the first game. Important context as well is that Hopp may not be at full power because he is coming off of being forcefully restrained and confined to the underworld for decades. Hopp can also transform into bigger forms, one in particular being gigantic and able to fully squash a human being easily, leaving no trace, potentially being a 9-8 feet, depending on if you think there being no remnant is a gameplay mechanic or not, which I personally don't. In his unrelenting pursuit of Ruby, Hopp also shows a variety of abilities, such as shape-shifting, transformation, reality warping, teleportation, regeneration, elasticity, some technopathy, imitation, illusion creation, summoning, or shadow manipulation, as he was able to create or summon the dark hand seen at the end of the game. And also, last but not least, perhaps Hopp's most known asset, his super hearing. Now, it has been said on certain sites that Hopp has a weakness to fire due to what occurs in the Firestarter ending, which is canon. Because in this ending, Ruby burns down the house along with Mr. Hopp. This makes 0 sense. For one, Hopp quite literally brags about being from the fires of hell to Ruby. And I imagine that the fires of hell are far more potent than any flame from the above. 2, the fire fails to even kill Mr. Hopp or even stop him in any meaningful way. Hopp literally survives and in the next game is unharmed. Shoot, maybe even stronger, considering the context, which we will go over later. And with that, we can move on to Mr. Hopp's Playhouse 2, the second installment in the trilogy. Bringing his friends along for the ride, Hopp is back at it again in this prequel game, which further explains Mr. Hopp and his origins. They originate from the underworld, the aforementioned hell that Hopp spoke of, demonically possessed toys of a former angelic being known as the Entity. This game's form of Satan, where they seek to gain souls in the orphanage in which the game takes place. This game follows Esther, Ruby's Nana from the first game. Not much new is shown for Hopp's abilities. He's still a shape-shifting, size-morphing bunny that can squash humans into nothing, but there are still some interesting additions made by this game. Introduced in this game are the 6 medallions, which are each interdimensional in nature. They keep the balance between the realms, and said realms are seemingly vanished when they are taken away. Based on this, I believe it's fair to say that these medallions are around Universal or Universal Plus in power. Hopp is also able to teleport to these realms, giving him a form of dimensional travel. As the final boss of the game, Hopp merges with Stripe and Bow to form a creature known as the Amalgamation. This form is able to take several hits from the combined power of the 6 medallions, with Hopp explicitly being the one to remain the longest, showing a power that exceeds his comrades. After his loss, Hopp is banished back to the underworld. This is why I believe he could be weakened in the first game, as he finally starts to slip back into Earth after being confined for decades. Therefore, based on the evidence I see from this game, I think it's fair to scale Mr. Hopp to the universal feats exhibited by the medallions. So, as we can see, it's a quite big increase from the first game, especially in regards to overall power. But I suppose you can expect this when you start to introduce different realms and interdimensional overlords, so, it's to be expected. In fact, these aspects get even more expounded upon as we move into the third and final entry of the series, Mr. Hopp's Playhouse 3. At an all-time low presence within the series, Hopp comes back for his not-so-climactic end with his now creator, the Entity. Not much is different in regards to the lore in this game, except the new addition, the stones, which can be found throughout the game. An essential piece of lore that can be found within the stone stations throughout the game explains that these stones individually have slivers of the Six's power. Now in the canon ending of the game, which can only be unlocked by collecting all of the stones in the game, Ruby fights Hopp with 4 medallions and all of the stones. This means that she should be comparable to the use of just the 6 stones by themselves, if not greater. I say this because we can observe that the stones in conjunction with the medallions are far above what they can do alone. For example, in the final boss fight, Esther becomes something of a deity from the combined powers of each.
That compassion you sacred ones insist on carrying is what makes you so weak. You both will die here.
Now, it is you who will experience fear.
This just further doubles down on the Universal Plus figures I laid out earlier on, which I feel is the best scaling for the character. I suppose you can use the more grounded wall level tiers as opposed to the more dimensional scaling from the latter 2 games, but I don't really think that's fair to do because we didn't see the upper limits of what Hopp could do in the first game in the first place, and he was weakened, so I believe the interdimensional stuff is more consistent with the character and what he represents. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Mr. Hopp's and his power levels. As I've said before, Hopp is really just a character that stuck with me just for the basic design and the premise of the games. The concept may not be entirely original, but just goes to show you the wheel doesn't need reinventing, just refinement. And with that, the scaling has finished. See ya.